Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Sully's Mistake Factory. When we last left, guys, I was down in the bilge of the boat. I was talking about making my measurements for my wiring, talking about making the templates for things. So I went ahead and I did a little bit of arts and crafts time already. Went ahead and made up some templates. As you can see here, this is just some very cheap wood and hot glue, and we can go ahead and get these fit out, and we know exactly what they are. This is actually between the stairs. This is where my wire run's gonna sit, kind of sit right there on that. I wanted to clean that up, make that look nice. And then both sides of the stairs, we were talking about putting all of our terminals and our charge controller, RBSs and all of that. That's this guy right here. And amazingly, in the boat world, this actually mirrors on both sides to the same measurement, so I only had to make one template. What I didn't do, however, was make a template for where I'm going to be mounting the inverter. If you'll recall, over where that inverter is going to end up going, currently there's a battery charger there, there's a 110 outlet, and there's a raw water intake globe. So I didn't want to have to pull all of that off of there quite yet. So what I did is I took the measurements on my handy dandy piece of cardboard right here, and I'm gonna go ahead and make this just a little bit fatter than it needs, and we can trim it to fit. While we're here, we can at least get the raw, rough cut in. And then when we go back to the boat, probably in the next episode, we'll start pulling all that stuff off the wall and get that piece fit in there. But I wanted to, while we're here, get this stuff all cut because I got the tools all out and we have everything. I've got this nice sheet of 1/2-inch starboard right here. It's gonna make everything look nice and gonna be able to mount everything really clean. Remember, in last season, we used a lot of this when we were talking about mounting all of our Lumishore lighting and all of our RBSs. You saw also, I took in the engine room on the port side, that's where the RBSs were mounted and circuits and everything else. So it's just really easy to work with and it looks really clean. So that's why we're going with it. So, without further ado, guys, we're gonna kick into probably a little music montage here, a little time lapse, get the track saw set up here, and I'm gonna go ahead and rip out, let's see, what do I need? I need 2 of these guys, 1 of these guys, and this inverter piece. So, without further ado, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and rip into that. We'll do a little time lapse, and we'll be back hopefully with all of my fingers and no blood, and we'll show you what we're going to do next. Check it out. So we managed to get all the cutting done. I still have all 10 fingers. There's no blood on the table. We're gonna call that a win. And now, guys, we are going to dig in and we're going to start figuring out where everything lands. In particular, on this board, you kind of see here, this is how it's gonna represent into that stairwell like we were talking about earlier. This is the stairs right here coming down. So we've got this much space to work with to start mounting everything on here. So what are we gonna do? What are we gonna mount on there, guys? Well, the last video talked about using the RBS and relocating it, and that's that remote battery switch. I did a little bit of homework, digging around. I always like to check out what's the latest and greatest and newest and best out there. And I've been looking at Egis for a while now, and I stumbled into this guy right here. This is going to allow us to do a couple of different things. And I don't think it's gonna be for everybody, but for our application, this is gonna be really slick, I think. We're gonna be able to take power in right here, and then what we're gonna be able to do is we can go ahead, you'll hear this little click right there. This is going to allow it to branch out. We can feed our inverter on one side and we can feed our house load on the other side. So we have these 2 right here. We can turn them on and off independently. We can do it locally, meaning right here at the switch. There is a Deutsch plug on here. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find a Deutsch plug to fit this, so I might end up cutting it, putting on a terminal strip, and doing the remote battery switches that way. But again, I can open up my stairs, I can reach right in, I can turn this on and off locally very quickly and very easily. And this also has NEMA 2000 on it, guys. So I'm going to be able to remotely monitor on here battery voltages on my NEMA network directly from the source closest to the battery. A lot of times you see the battery source, so if you're reading battery voltage on an MFD, it's reading it at the voltage coming into the back of the unit. that doesn't account for all the loss and everything along the way. So this is going to be the most accurate way to do it. And on the back side here, there's a couple little rubber plugs that come off. We're going to have to adjust some dip switches to get this set up so that it'll read on the NEMA network and it knows what it's doing. So we've got that guy going in there. And then if we're going to come off of that, we're going to feed our inverter. We need to fuse that. Remember, guys, that is 4/0 wire going over to that big inverter charger. So that's where this guy comes in. This is a T-class fuse holder. Now, there is a plastic cover that goes over it, but on these two studs right here, a T-class fuse goes in. That's a big 400 amp fuse. So again, we're fusing for the size of the wire, right? And then we can do out to the inverter, and this can come from the switch. That's going to feed that really nicely right there. And then on the other side, feeding the house side, I don't really have a big draw because the DC loads for the flybridge, meaning the stereo, our navigation equipment, VHF radios, the bulk of the lighting actually for all of the Lumishore lighting is all being handled by a battery bank up on the bridge separately, and it has an ACR that is just basically tagging off of the house bank down here in the engine space. The biggest draw that I do have is the windlass. I don't use it that much, but again, hoping to do a little more anchoring, so want to make sure we're sizing this properly. So what do we do? Well, I went with Egis here, and we did a 200 amp resettable. So the flag's down, we know it's off. Turn it on, there we go, we know we're good. So this is a resettable thermal breaker right here. So again, even if I pop it, overload it, the windlass, kind of bogs down and trips this out. It's a quick into the engine room. You can go ahead, reset this, and be back in business. So we're gonna obviously come off that switch, go over to this. This will feed over to the main feed for the house load that we did last year. And last but not least, we have this from Egis as well. This is a negative terminal strip. Well, I mean, it could be positive as well, but we're in this case using it for negative terminals. We have 4 studs on here. The other nice thing is they actually have 4 small screws right here, so you can add on to this right here as a main point. So obviously from the battery bank, we're going to go ahead, put our negative right on there, and then we can do our inverter on this side, we can do our house load on this side, keeps it all nice and close to that one main, in from that negative, gives us a spare one, and we still have these 4 screws as well. And last but not least, it's not here yet, guys. I don't have it in my hands. It is inbound though, and that is the most important part of all of this, and that is the Xantrex 60 amp MPPT. That's basically the solar charge controller. So what I've gone ahead and done, a little more arts and crafts time with a little bit of cardboard, and we've gone ahead and done a cutout for the size of the unit. And I've actually marked on here as well where this is, right? We have our solar in, so that's our main feed in. Then we have our out right there, that's our main out going into our house bank. And then we have our temp probe sensor and our comms port, because we are going to do a remote display for this. So we need to make sure we know how much room to dedicate from this onto this space here. Now, given the size of this in our limited room here, I think this is going to be our anchor point, guys, in figuring out where things are going to land. So it's easier for me if I just do this all on the bench right here with the tape measure and the square, and I can kind of start marking everything off and make sure we are giving enough room for everything. So the charge controller, I think I want to put that towards the top up here and give a little bit of buffer around it, because I'm still going to go ahead and router over these edges, make this nice, look presentable and everything. So I'm going to router over my edges. So I think that that basically is going to be where my charge controller lands. Obviously, I don't have a mounting template for it yet, but what I can do is I can kind of tape it in place so that way we know where we plan on it living. And again, guys, this is just ballpark. I'm not exacting on this, but what this does allow me to do, to get this all taped on here, is I can now, because I've marked this, I know what my feed wires in are going to be, and I know they're going to be 10 gauge. It's going to be a 10-2 going in, and those are decent size, so we want to make sure we're leaving enough room in there. Actually, might even be 8. I got to do some math on that one and figure it out, but I want to make sure I'm leaving enough room for this wire run on here, guys, so that way as we go, we're not screwing ourselves, because I'm really good at doing that sometimes. So take a look here, guys. If we take this, I bring this up here, we take this guy here. We obviously know we're gonna have our solar in. So I'm gonna bring that, and that's gonna route down right there for us. And then to our, let's see, that's our battery out. That's gonna go to our house bank. Same thing again, that'll follow that same path down. So we've got this area down here that we can now work with to figure out where we want to land all of those other parts. Obviously the communication cable, that's RJ45, that's really small and simple. Battery temp sensor, again, very small, very simple. So we've got that to take care of right there very easily. So now we got to figure out is how do we want this to feed, and making sure we're allowing enough room again, because at the bottom of this here, it still has to make the turn and follow those solar wires as well, making sure everything's good there. And we want to keep this T-class fuse as close to the switch as possible and practicable. So we've got a lot of stuff to kind of consider here. So let's start laying this out and measuring things out, because if we're going to do this, it should look sweet too. So if we do this, we give ourselves some room right here, and we can bring our battery in. And this, we know our main feed on this for the house bank is going to be feeding in right from the middle on the bottom there. So that's going to be really actually pretty straightforward. And then we know the feed off of both sides of this battery switch are actually going to go over. In this case, one of them is going to go to this thermal resettable right here, and the other one is going to go to this T-class fuse holder right here. And then the wires are going to go out from there. So that 4-aught coming off of this is actually kind of ideal, that it'll come down and make that bend around. Well, as much of a bend as 4-aught can make. And so we'll have that right there. That'll still give us room for the charge controller. So now we just got to kind of start looking at this to see, does this look right? How does this look? Ideally, I'd like to keep everything kind of tight and tidy and still make access. Now, in theory, I could through bolt all of this stuff and then bolt this panel on, but that means anytime I want to service any one of these items, guys, I then need to unbolt this whole panel. So that's why I'm not through bolting any of this stuff. Instead, I'm just going to mark it all, drill all my holes, and then we're going to go ahead. We'll go to the boat. We can start mounting things in place and see how it all looks. So without any further ado, guys, let's get after it. Now we have everything all mounted up on here and dressed really nice, kind of, you know, eye sweet here, getting everything lined up on here, making it look good. Now, I know it's in an engine space. I know I'm not going to see it that often, but just for troubleshooting and everything else, it just taking that extra couple of minutes, lining everything all up, getting these terminals in line, getting all that kind of stuff, just goes a long way just when you look at it when it's all said and done. So, like we talked about, we've got our switch coming up. We've got our 4-aught wire that's going to come up and feed here from the bottom. That's why we've got that terminal right there. Then it's going to come out here, and we're going to use one of these 4-aught lugs right here, and that is going to come over and feed this other 4-aught lug right here for our T-class fuse. And then we're going to take over here, we're going to take the 2-gauge wire from here to here. We can see we've got our lugs right there, and then it'll go out and feed our house load from there. And then we have our 2-aught right here, negative bus bar, and we have our 4-aught that's going to be coming from the house battery bank. And then we have the 4-aught that is going to be feeding the inverter charger. Now you'll notice I put the main feed between the middle, so that way it can spread out and hopefully keep those losses to a minimum. So that's all mounted up. Let's get it knocked down and let's start working on some crimping. Now, as I mentioned, guys, we are working with larger gauge wire. 2-gauge is not an insignificant size, but when we start working with 4-gauge wire like this right here, you're normally going to want a crimper like this guy right here. It's a hydraulic one. You pressure it and it crimps it down and you get a really nice solid crimp. I'm very lucky though, guys. I'm in the shop and we have a shop tool here. This is the Milwaukee crimper. This, guys, is awesome. It's expensive, but if you are doing a lot of large cable terminations, this is the tool to buy. It just makes it so quick, so nice, and consistent when it comes to crimps. So, without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get the first crimp rolling here. we go ahead, we feed our wire into here, try and get all of the wire in there and try and not get us cut in the process. We get that lugged in there. I don't know if I like that. Yeah, that's pretty good in there. So we go ahead. Oh, one wire's trying to sneak away on us there. There we go. So we go ahead and open this guy up. And this is the slick part about this. We just hold it in place. And we're going to spin it 180 degrees once it does the first one. But then we just press and hold. And there we go. First crimp done. Now we can go ahead. I can open this back up. And we can move it 180 degrees out. And same thing again. And then I can do one more, alternating off of that, even 90 degrees. And there we have a beautifully strong crimp. We got some hairs on there we're going to clean off. And then what we're going to do is we're going to crimp this one onto here on the other side of this. And we're just going to take some heat shrink tubing that I have here. And that'll cover this whole thing all up, make it look nice. So let's speed this up and let's get this cut and get this thing rolling, guys. All right, so there we have it, guys. Everything is all crimped. Now I've got my heat shrink. I went with red because, well, it's positive and we have it. So let's do it and do it right. So now we can go ahead and get that on there. We get the heat gun fired up here. And let's see what we can do from here. All right, that one is done. Now let's get on to the easier one. And that is the 2 gauge going over here to the other side to feed our house load. So I went ahead and got a fresh spool because I know I'm going to have to run a fair whack of this throughout for the extended house load. That cut. This guy slid right on there, nice and cleanly. And we need to change our dies out on this guy. And guys, this is the other nice thing about this tool right here, just how quick and easy you can change it out for different sizes that you are going to crimp. And this thing does run the entire gamut. So there we go. Now I've switched this thing over to the 2 gauge setup. So I can go ahead and uncoil a little bit here. And the same thing we just did for the 4/0, we're now going to do for this guy. And the same thing again, it's going to be a couple of them. We're going to do them 180 out, and we're going to get really nice, good, clean crimp here. There we go. Now this is a smaller lug, obviously the 2 gauge, so we can only get 2 crimps on this instead of 3 like we did with the 4/0. Give it the old pull test, make sure that's all good. It is. And now I can measure it out and see just what I need for the other side here. Because again, we're doing shorties on this thing. And looks like right there. Go ahead and lop this right here. And this cable cuts amazingly smoother than the 4/0 cable. So we go ahead, get that back, make sure that that's good and round, because when you cut it with some dull dikes like I just used right there, it does kind of squeeze it and get it oval shape, which then makes it harder to put back in to this guy right here. Put those in there like that. We'll make sure that they are clocked properly. When I say that they are clocked properly, guys, I want to make sure these eyes are the same. We don't want them 90 degrees out. So then we go ahead, put it on here, get a nice little fit going. We make sure we're all good. Then what I'm going to do is slightly unorthodox here, but I am going to tape it so that we know what that length is, and we know we don't lose that length by just by guessing and by gollying it. And let's give this thing a whirl. All right, now let's see how that crimp turned out. If it doesn't pass the pull test, we'll just make another one. All right, passes the pull test. Let's get a little heat shrink for this guy as well. Make sure that's gonna fit, it will. How much of it do we need? I don't know, let's figure it out. Second verse, same as the first, only in reverse. There we go. Cut this guy nice. Slide that on there like so. Come on. Like so. Make sure that that fits. It does. And now we can break out the heat gun. And there we go, just like that. We can go ahead and slide this one on there. And we can go ahead and figure out which nuts go where, play that game. These go here and here. And guys, we're pretty good. Problem was, when I made this 4/0 one, I am literally about half a thread off, and I don't want to make another one of these. So I think what we're gonna do is, that's why we left a little bit of a buffer in here, we can scooch this T-fuse just a little bit more over here. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen that up, see what that looks like, and if I like it, great. If I don't like it, I guess I'll just make another one of those. So let's get after it. So I was right, guys. I ended up having to move this over about a centimeter. It was just off just enough that this is going to be a really snug fit, and I didn't like it. So moved it over. We're going to keep our MPPT charge controller. We'll just make that right in line so it'll all look really good and be just fine. So that cable's over to here. That one's done. This one over here for our house feed is done as well. So now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take this all back apart, and I'm gonna go ahead and make some snow in here. I'm gonna router this edge here and that edge there, because that's what's going to be visible when you see the finished product in the engine space. I've got another one of these that mirrors on the other side that I made in case I wanna mount some stuff over there. So we need to go ahead and get that routed. And then I've got another piece across the back. We need to get that routed as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Then we're gonna load this all up. We're gonna get back over to the boat, get back down in the bilge, and let's start seeing where all this stuff lands. And we're gonna have to figure out where we're gonna screw and, you know, all that good stuff. But without being on board the boat, I didn't want to go ahead and do any pre-screws or countersink or anything like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and make some snow, and then we'll get over to the bilge and see how this all fits. Well, we are living up to the namesake of the channel, Sully's Mistake Factory. Mistakes were made, and that means another Saturday morning video ending where I didn't have it edited quite right. So here we are, guys. We will be back next Saturday morning. We'll be dropping another video. We're gonna be down in the bilge, starting to get things mounted up and wired up and just fighting with all that, getting that all taken care of and seeing how far we can get. So, if you have any questions about today or any of the previous episodes, leave it down below in the comments. We will see you next Saturday on Sully's Mistake Factory. Peace.